You know what's funny? The people who told me I'd never succeed. Yeah, I bought their company last week. It wasn't that long ago when I was the one on the receiving end of their doubts. I was the dreamer who didn't have the right credentials, the hobbyist who didn't stand a chance. But here I am, not just surviving but thriving, owning what used to be their top competitor. The same people who laughed at me when I said I was going to build something from scratch are now scrambling to keep up. And let me tell you, that feeling, it's sweeter than any victory they could ever imagine. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the kind of person who just keeps going. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I've always had this unshakable belief that if I worked hard enough, I could make things happen. Sure, I didn't come from a family of big-time entrepreneurs or business tycoons. In fact, my parents were school teachers in a small town in Michigan, nothing flashy, just solid, hardworking folks. I worked my way through college, scraping by on scholarships, part-time jobs, and the occasional loan. After graduation, I landed a steady corporate job at a marketing firm in Chicago. The kind of job that looked great on paper but had me waking up every day with a knot in my stomach, wondering if this was really all there was. It wasn't that I hated the job, I just knew I was capable of so much more. But you know how it goes, right? People always told me, Sarah, be realistic. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur, you've got a good thing here. Don't risk it. My best friend Claire used to say, not everyone's meant to lead a company, Sarah. Maybe it's just not your thing. But those voices of doubt, they only made me more determined. There was a part of me that just knew there was something bigger out there waiting for me. I was ready to step into something new, something bigger than myself. And though I didn't know it yet, I was about to prove everyone wrong. It all started on a particularly frustrating Tuesday morning. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting at my desk in the marketing firm, staring at the same spreadsheet I'd been working on for the past few hours, feeling that all-too-familiar sense of dread. My boss, Greg, had just handed me another pile of work and gave me the same tired speech about how corporate politics were going to delay any new projects I had in mind. My ideas, those wild, out-of-the-box, crazy concepts that always seemed to get the most excitement in meetings, were once again shut down. That day, something inside me snapped. I had spent years trying to convince myself that this job was just a stepping stone, that someday I'd climb the corporate ladder. But it was clear now that I wasn't just hitting a ceiling, I was suffocating under it. The thought of spending another decade sitting in that office, answering to people who didn't understand my vision, made me sick. I remember walking to the coffee machine, staring at my reflection in the glass of the break room. I was tired of playing it safe. Tired of listening to people tell me no because it was easier for them to keep things the way they were. And then, out of nowhere, I thought, what if I just walked away? What if I tried something completely different, something that scared me, something real? That was the day I made the decision. No more waiting for the right moment. No more playing small. I was going to start my own business, even if it meant risking everything. I had no idea what I was doing, no plan, and honestly no clue how to even begin. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit in that office anymore, watching other people's dreams come true while mine slowly withered away. I took the plunge. I quit my job without a backup plan, nothing but a gut feeling and a dream. I'll be honest, it wasn't glamorous. For the first few weeks, I felt like a fish out of water. My apartment became my office, and my business meetings were me pacing back and forth in my living room, trying to figure out how to make a name for myself. I knew I needed some backing, so I reached out to a few investors. The first one I met was Dan, a so-called venture capitalist I met at a networking event. He sat across from me in a fancy cafe, looking me up and down like I was some kind of amusement. "Sarah, let's get real here," he said, sipping his overpriced latte. "I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you, you're not exactly entrepreneur material, are you?" He glanced at the sketch of my business plan. This looks more like a Pinterest board than a strategy." I smiled. I thought the same thing actually. But sometimes the best ideas come from Pinterest. You should check it out sometime. Dan wasn't amused, but I could see that the more he dismissed me, the more my determination grew. I told him I didn't need his approval. I was going to make it on my own, with or without his investment. When I walked out of that meeting, I had the kind of fire in my belly that could have powered a rocket. The next person I reached out to was Claire, my best friend. We'd had so many late-night conversations about starting businesses together, but I'd always dismissed the idea, afraid of failure. Now I wasn't backing down. "I did it, Claire," I said over the phone. "I quit, I'm going all in." She laughed nervously. "Sarah, are you sure about this? Like really sure? I mean, you've got nothing, no team, no resources, just passion." I paused. "Exactly, and sometimes that's all you need, watch me." The first few months of my new venture were nothing short of a roller coaster. If you think that quitting your stable job to follow your dream is some kind of smooth, glorious path, well, I've got news for you. It's more like a rough back road in a beat-up car with no suspension. The kind of ride that makes you question all your life choices and whether you can even finish the trip. My business, which at that point was just an idea I had scribbled on a napkin, was growing, slowly, very slowly. I had no real team, no fancy office space, just a laptop and a relentless drive. The first obstacle hit when I started looking for investors who would take me seriously. Let's just say they didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. One of the first meetings was with Karen, a seasoned investor who was notorious in the industry for her no-nonsense approach. She had a reputation for crushing dreams with a single raised eyebrow. When I walked into her office, I could already feel the weight of her judgment. Her high-backed leather chair seemed to swallow her, and the pristine, minimalistic decor screamed, "I'm too successful to care about your little idea." "So, Sarah," Karen said, flipping through my proposal, her eyes scanning it like a hawk looking for the smallest flaw. "What exactly makes you think you can succeed in this market? There are established players here. Big names. You're a nobody with no real experience." I tried to keep my cool. "Well, Karen, I'd argue that sometimes being a nobody is an advantage. It means I'm not tied down by outdated systems or egos. I can think outside the box, that's what will set me apart." She chuckled a low, dismissive sound. "Outside the box, how adorable. The only thing that sets you apart is your naivety." That hit. Not because I hadn't heard worse from people, but because Karen's words carried the weight of years in the industry. She wasn't wrong that I lacked experience. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't looking for validation from people like her. As I left her office, my confidence wavered, but I refused to let her dismiss me like that. I wasn't going to back down, not now, not after coming this far. But the challenges didn't stop there. I had the idea, the grit, and a handful of loyal customers, but I was running on fumes. No one was giving me the resources I needed, and I was stuck juggling marketing, design, customer service, and admin work. Most nights I fell asleep at my desk, dreaming of what it would be like to have a proper team. But every time I reached out for help, I got the same line from friends and family. "Sarah, you're doing great, but maybe you should just get a small loan. You can't do everything yourself," my brother Mike said during one of our weekly phone calls. "Yeah, right," I said, trying to mask my frustration. "Sure, I'll just call up a bank and say, 'Hi, can I borrow a couple $100,000? I've got a dream, a laptop, and a whole lot of determination.' What do you think?" Mike didn't get it, the banks didn't get it. Hell, most of my old colleagues didn't get it. "Just play it safe," they'd say. "Why risk everything when you've got a good thing going?" But that was the problem. The people around me couldn't see what I saw. They saw a woman scrambling in the dark, while I saw a vision, a blueprint for something bigger than myself. I was all in on this idea, and I wasn't about to let the world tell me it wasn't worth the gamble. Then came the next obstacle, the competition. One day, I got an email from a company I'd been keeping an eye on, the big players in the industry. The email was casual at first, just a check-in about some trends. But then it turned into a warning. Apparently, they'd caught wind of what I was doing and the tone of the email shifted. It wasn't so friendly anymore. "Just a heads up, Sarah," the email read. "We've noticed your recent growth in the market. We've got a lot of resources at our disposal, and it's not in your best interest to step into our territory. We've been around for years, and we know how to play the game." I remember reading that email over and over, my hands shaking. Not in your best interest? They were trying to intimidate me. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was a power play. They were trying to crush the little guy before I even had a chance to compete. But here's the thing. I wasn't just the little guy anymore. Sure, I didn't have the multi-million-dollar budgets or the massive teams, but I had something they didn't have: agility. They were stuck in their ways, unwilling to adapt, while I was out here with fresh ideas and a hunger to prove everyone wrong. "Yeah, well, they can send all the emails they want," I muttered to myself, grinning. "But they don't know who they're messing with." And that's when the shift happened. I started thinking less about how to catch up with the industry giants and more about how to beat them at their own game. I didn't need their resources, I didn't need their approval. All I needed was my vision and the willingness to take risks, things they had long forgotten how to do. The battle wasn't over, but I was no longer playing defense. I was getting ready to play offense. Things had been getting harder, but I was stubborn, and sometimes that stubbornness is exactly what you need when you're up against a wall. The pressure was mounting, and with every setback, it felt like the universe was trying to tell me to quit. But quitting, that was never an option for me. I was at my wit's end when I stumbled upon a moment of clarity. I was sitting at my kitchen table, 2 days away from missing another round of payments to my suppliers, when I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from Mark, one of my early clients, who had been with me from the very beginning. He was a small business owner like me, and we'd formed a kind of underdog alliance. "Sarah," Mark said, his voice a mix of excitement and urgency, "I need to tell you something. I've been hearing some huge buzz about your brand. People are talking about you. I'm getting inquiries about your product everywhere I go." I blinked. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Yeah, I mean it. There's been some chatter in the industry. You're starting to gain serious attention and people are getting curious. It's like the underdog is starting to look like a contender, and they don't know what to make of it." I sat up straighter, staring at my laptop screen, not quite sure if I was dreaming. This was the first time I had heard anything that sounded like a real, tangible opportunity. The only problem? It wasn't just good news, it was a warning too. The competition had taken notice of me, the big players I'd been avoiding. They were now aware of my existence, and they were not happy about it. That same afternoon, I received another email. This one wasn't as polite as the last. It was from a big distributor who had initially turned me down but was now interested in talking to me again. But this time, the email had a tone that made my blood run cold. "We've noticed your recent developments, Sarah. Let's talk about expanding your reach before you become too big to control." I reread that email 3 times, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. They weren't just offering a partnership, they were warning me. It felt like they were threatening to overwhelm me with their size and resources unless I played by their rules. It was like the industry was making a choice for me. Play small and stay safe, or take the leap and risk everything. But I wasn't going to let fear dictate my next move. In fact, that email did something for me. It lit a fire inside me that I didn't even know I had left. I'd spent so long fighting to stay afloat, but now I realized I wasn't just fighting to survive, I was fighting to thrive. I took a deep breath, hit reply, and typed back the boldest message I could muster. "Thank you for the offer. I'm not interested in controlling my growth. I'm interested in building something that lasts. If you want to partner, I'm in. But don't think for a second I'll let you control the direction of this ship. I'm steering it and I'm going full speed ahead." I hit send, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. In that moment, I knew something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the naive dreamer anymore. I wasn't some small fish in a big pond. I was the one who would dictate the terms from here on out. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I finally hired a few key players to join my team, people I trusted, people who believed in the vision and were willing to hustle just as hard as I was. We worked around the clock, rebranding and expanding our outreach. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. But then came the next challenge, the launch of our new marketing campaign. It was the most ambitious thing we had ever done. I knew that if this campaign didn't land, everything we had worked for would be at risk. The pressure felt heavier than ever before. My new team was buzzing with excitement and nerves. They looked to me for direction, and I could feel the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. One late night, just before we were set to go live, I gathered everyone around for a quick meeting. "Listen, I know this feels huge. I know it feels like we're about to either sink or swim, but this is exactly why we've been pushing so hard. We're not here to be a flash in the pan. We're here to stay, and we're here to make noise." One of my new hires, Alex, a marketing genius with a sharp eye for trends, spoke up. "Sarah, I've been tracking the analytics. We're actually gaining traction. We've got a shot at making a real dent in the market with this." "Exactly," I said, giving him a nod. "We have one shot to prove them wrong. Let's take it." I felt my heart pounding, but I didn't let the nerves show. This wasn't just about hitting a sales target, it was about showing the world what we were made of. No more second guessing, no more playing small. And then, right as we launched, the feedback started rolling in. Customers loved it. The industry buzz was building, and with every positive review, I could feel the tide turning in our favor. For the first time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about success. We weren't just fighting to stay afloat anymore. We were becoming a contender, and the people who had doubted me, they were starting to take notice. In the span of just a few weeks, I watched my little company go from struggling to stay in the race to leading the pack in its category. The shift was almost palpable. We were no longer the underdog, we were the disruptors. As things began to pick up, I thought I had finally reached a point where I could breathe a little easier. But of course, life had other plans. The hurdles I faced only grew bigger as my business gained attention. It wasn't just about competing with established companies anymore, it was about surviving the chaos that came with growth. The first challenge came in the form of a phone call that I wasn't expecting. Todd from Hillcrest Ventures, one of the biggest players in the industry, was on the line. "Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, his voice dripping with authority. "You've been taking clients from us and I'm not happy about it." I was stunned. "I'm not stealing clients, Todd. People are choosing us because we offer a better product." His tone turned threatening. "You're poking the bear and the bear doesn't like it. We're watching you." I ended the call with a nervous laugh. This wasn't just business, it was starting to feel like a fight for survival. Todd wasn't the only one taking shots. As I scaled up, I began to feel the weight of competition in ways I hadn't imagined. The second challenge came from within. Running a growing business was far more complicated than I'd anticipated. The demands were suffocating. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in emails, calls, and tasks that never seemed to end. My small team was working harder than ever, but I could feel their frustration mounting, and it wasn't just about handling orders. It was about surviving the constant pressure. One night, after working nonstop for 48 hours, I collapsed into my chair, exhausted. I shot a text to Claire. "I can't do this anymore, I'm failing." Her reply was immediate. "You're not failing, you're just scaling. You've got this." Her words made me realize that I wasn't failing. I was just experiencing the growing pains that came with pushing a business beyond what it had ever been. I took a deep breath, regrouped, and set a plan to scale up properly. But then the real punch came: media backlash. A random article popped up calling my business a flash in the pan. It wasn't just an isolated review, it quickly escalated into a series of negative articles, all questioning the sustainability of my company. "Here today, gone tomorrow," they said. I was furious, but it wasn't just the press. Clients who had been loyal started hesitating, worried about the rumors swirling around. I spent hours reassuring them, but the pressure was building. The big players were using every tactic they could to discredit me. Through all this, the one thing that kept me going was the truth. I wasn't some overnight success story. I was in this for the long haul, and if people were starting to doubt me, I had to show them just how wrong they were. I thought I'd seen it all. The threats, the competition, the sleepless nights, these were the things that came with building a business from the ground up. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment when I realized just how close I was to winning. The tipping point came during a late-night meeting with my team. We were discussing ways to boost sales for the next quarter when I received an email that nearly made my heart stop. It was from a senior executive at one of the biggest companies in our industry, a company that I had spent years watching from afar, hoping to catch a glimpse of their secrets to success. This was the giant, the one that people had always told me I could never compete with. The email was simple enough at first, with a polite tone. "We've been following your progress and would like to discuss the possibility of working together. Your business has been impressive, and we believe there may be an opportunity for collaboration." But as I read between the lines, something started to feel off. The message was too polite, the phrasing was too measured. I scrolled back up to the sender's name and realized it was from someone I knew all too well. Greg, my old boss from the corporate world. Greg, the one who had laughed at my dreams and dismissed me as just another idealistic employee. The one who told me to stop wasting my time when I first mentioned starting my own business. And now, here he was, reaching out, acting like he had been rooting for me all along. I took a deep breath. There was no way I was going to let him have the satisfaction of thinking I'd be easily swayed by his polished words. This was the same man who dismissed me at every turn, and now he was offering me a chance to join forces with the very company that had once shut me out. I immediately called Claire. "You won't believe this," I said, pacing around my apartment. "Greg wants to partner up." She paused. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice thick with disbelief. "It's like he's pretending none of those years even happened. Like I don't remember him dismissing me every chance he got. Claire let out a long sigh. Sarah, don't fall for it, he's just trying to get in on what you've built. He wants to take credit for it. I mean, what's next? Is he going to claim you owe him a piece of your success? I thought about it for a second. Claire was right. This wasn't a gesture of admiration or respect, it was a calculated move. Greg didn't care about my dreams. He cared about capitalizing on my hard work now that it was starting to pay off. I sat down and composed my reply. Thank you for your offer, Greg, but I'm not interested in partnering with someone who didn't believe in me when it mattered. I've spent too much time building this from scratch to let someone like you come in and take a piece of it. Best of luck. The email felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just about turning him down, it was about making a stand. I was no longer the underdog fighting to get noticed. I was the one in control now. But the plot twist didn't end there. Less than an hour after I hit send, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I picked it up anyway. Sarah Mitchell, the voice on the other end was smooth, professional. It was a woman, someone who sounded like she'd spent years negotiating in high-stakes situations. This is she, I replied, trying to place her voice. I'm Catherine from Lark Industries. I've been following your work, and I think you've got something special. Greg wasn't the first one to reach out, but he won't be the last. We've been seeing the kind of results you're generating, and we want to discuss a potential buyout. My heart dropped. A buyout? They were offering to buy me out just like that. This wasn't a partnership. It was a clear message, you're not meant to grow any further, let us take control. But again, I couldn't just fold. This wasn't a random opportunity, it was a test. They wanted to see if I was willing to sell out, to hand over everything I'd worked for. The whole conversation felt like a well-played game, but I wasn't about to play by their rules. I stayed calm. I appreciate the offer, but my company isn't for sale. We're in this for the long haul. We'll continue to grow and innovate on our terms. The line went silent for a moment. You're making a mistake, Sarah. Think about it. No, you're making a mistake. You underestimated me from the start, and that's something you're going to regret. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, but with a sense of pride swelling in my chest. This wasn't just about rejecting an offer, it was about owning my power. I was no longer the dreamer, the idealist. I was the one who controlled the narrative now. That night, I sat back and reflected on everything I had been through. From the doubts and skepticism to the sleepless nights and endless obstacles, this was the moment that made it all worth it. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to let anyone take my vision away from me. As I looked out the window, I realized that the very people who had once told me I couldn't do it were now the ones scrambling to catch up. And that, my friend, was the sweetest victory of all. The crisis hit when I least expected it, and yet it felt like the inevitable punch to the gut. My company was growing, faster than I ever thought possible, but with growth came risks and the pressure was now suffocating. We had just launched a new product line and everything seemed to be running smoothly. That is, until we got the first complaint. It wasn't just any complaint. It was a massive issue with one of our top products. A malfunction that caused major customer dissatisfaction. At first, I thought it was a fluke, a one-off mistake. But then more complaints started pouring in. Our customer support team was overwhelmed, and social media was starting to heat up with angry posts. The worst part, some of our biggest clients, the ones who had been with us from the beginning, were now starting to question whether they'd made the right choice. I had been riding high, feeling invincible. But now I was looking at the very real possibility of losing everything. This wasn't just a product failure, it was a potential catastrophe for our brand. The trust we had worked so hard to build was crumbling in front of my eyes. That night I barely slept. I sat at my desk, staring at emails, trying to come up with a solution that could turn everything around. It felt like I was fighting an invisible enemy, an enemy I had no idea how to defeat. Every decision I made seemed to only make the situation worse. I couldn't afford to lose this, not now, not after everything we'd been through, but I wasn't sure if I could fix it in time. The next morning, after hours of sleepless pacing, I woke up with a new sense of clarity. I couldn't let fear control me, not now. Yes, the crisis was serious, but it wasn't the end of the road. If anything, it was a test. A test to see if I could rise above it, just like I had with every other obstacle that came my way. I gathered the team for an emergency meeting. We were all feeling the pressure, but I could see the determination in their eyes. We weren't going to back down, we were going to fix this together. I knew we had the talent, the heart, and the drive to make things right. Listen, everyone, I said, standing at the front of the room. We've faced challenges before and we've overcome them. This is no different. It's a setback, not the end. We're going to do everything we can to make things right with our customers. I assigned immediate tasks, reaching out to customers, offering refunds, and making personal calls to the clients who were most upset. We were going to own this mistake and show our clients that we weren't just a company selling products. We were a company that cared. We weren't going to sweep it under the rug. We were going to fix it head-on, no matter how difficult or costly it might be. By the end of the week, we had addressed the issue. The repairs were made, the complaints were resolved, and the customers were starting to come back. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. Slowly but surely, we regained their trust. It was the kind of work that felt like climbing a mountain 1 inch at a time, but we were climbing, and that's all that mattered. In the end, we not only fixed the problem, we came out of it stronger. The crisis wasn't just a test of our ability to handle failure, it was a test of our character, and we passed. By the time we had turned the crisis around, I realized something. The business wasn't just a reflection of my dreams anymore. It was a reflection of the resilience and dedication of everyone who had stood by me. We weren't just a team. We were a family, bound together by the belief that no setback could define us. And here's the kicker: once we emerged from the ashes of that crisis, something incredible happened. The same customers who had been upset with us became some of our most loyal supporters. They saw how we handled the problem, how we owned up to our mistakes and worked tirelessly to fix them. Trust wasn't something we just asked for anymore, it was something we earned, and that made all the difference. Months later, I stood in front of a conference room full of potential investors, pitching our next big idea. The room was buzzing and I could feel the energy. I wasn't the same woman who had started this journey, timid, uncertain, and eager to prove myself. I was confident, strong, and ready to take on whatever came next. When the meeting ended, one of the investors pulled me aside. "Sarah," he said, "I've been in this business for decades, and I've never seen someone turn a crisis into a victory quite like you." I smiled, knowing he wasn't just talking about the product or the money. He was talking about the heart and grit we'd shown in the face of adversity. The story of my business wasn't just about the wins, it was about how we overcame the losses. And in that, I had finally succeeded.